Oh, I see, yeah.
Why is that?
I do sometimes. It's more necessary. I keep forgetting them. I don't really need them that much.
Well, it appears to be 7 o'clock, so I suppose we should call the meeting to order. Can we have, I'm calling it to order, can we have the roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Arata?
Present.
Commissioner Bajaj? Absent. Commissioner Funabashi?
Present.
Commissioner Nafisi? Absent. Commissioner Beely?
Present.
Commissioner Sao?
Present.
Chair Simpson?
I am here. Let's have the salute to the flag. Can you lead us, Commissioner Funabashi?
Oh, it'd be my pleasure. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any blue folder items?
No blue folder items
No
tonight.
comments or anything like that? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. We have to approve the order of the agenda. I'm out. And it was suggested that perhaps we ought to move the item J1 up ahead of the discussion of L1, the continued items. Would somebody care to make a motion to do that?
I'll make a motion that we rearrange the agenda to reflect the first item to be our discussion and selection of a new Public Works and Sustainability Commission chairperson and vice chairperson.
And is there a second for
I'll
that?
second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Don't see any opposed, so we will move that up and figure out what we're doing then before we have the discussion on the possible action on rights of way for native planting. I guess we're now to the consent calendar. Does anybody see something there that they would like to pull out and discuss, or are we comfortable just enacting that in one single motion? Anything there that minutes need to be corrected or anything like that?
I just had one question of clarification because I was absent at the last meeting. I noticed that the minutes were from the August meeting. That's right, correct? So our
Correct.
September minutes will come up next month.
Right. We have a new minute secretary that's coming on board, so there's some transition. So yes, this is correct, and it's the August meeting minutes. September, we're going to have at a later date.
So we're going to have
Thank
two.
Hopefully, yeah, next time.
All right, so can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Murata makes that motion. Any second for that?
I'll make the second.
Okay, Commissioner Funabashi. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Do we need a comment, public
Yeah,
comment
thank
on that? I don't think so.
We do need to ask for public
Is there any
comment.
public comment on the consent calendar? Any email comment or e-comments?
There's no e-comments and no one on Zoom that would like to speak.
Okay, so let's vote on that motion to adopt the consent calendar. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, it's adopted. Okay, this is now the time in the agenda where we are asking for if there's any public comment on anything whatsoever that's under the jurisdiction of this commission. But if it's something that's going to be on the agenda, we discuss it then. This is for the time to make comments about anything, but not agendized. Does anyone have any public comment on anything? Don't see any, or do we have any e-comments or emails or any of that good stuff for public comment?
No e-comments and no one on Zoom would like to speak.
Okay. So that being the case, I guess we now move to item J1, which we moved up. So I guess we can start discussing what should happen and who should be chairman. Any thoughts?
I don't imagine there's any staff presentation on this, right? So
On your own tonight, gentlemen.
Well, maybe I'll just kind of take the lead, especially because we have two commissioners joining us now. Traditionally, we're a 7-person commission with one chairperson who generally leads the agenda. John has done it for at least 2 years
I
now.
think two, yeah.
And I think I did it for 2 or 3 years prior. And we kind of served, I believe you served as vice chair,
I think before I became chair, as I recall.
who then would step up and be the chair in absence of the chair. But the chair basically just leads the, kind of keeps the meeting moving and like that. So obviously with your being new to the commission, we wouldn't necessarily throw you to the lions right away, although yeah,
We probably would not, would be my thought. But might possibly as a vice commissioner, vice chairman. But I had been thinking that perhaps Commissioner Bajaj would be ready to step up to it, but I understand that he's not interested. Did we hear?
He did email tonight that he understood that this was an item, and if he was nominated in his absence, he would actually decline the chair position, but he would consider the vice chair.
Okay.
so we have that.
So we have that. So, I mean, what do we want to do here?
So John, you're the current chair.
I'm the current chair.
Can current existing chairs rerun for chair again?
Sure.
Yeah. okay,
Although
so
some of
that's-
us kind of think it's time to pass the torch, but, I mean, if the commission feels that I should continue, I guess I would continue, but, and if I get tired of it some way through the midterm, I can step down and ask somebody else to be reelected, right? Or elected, right? I could resign as chairman?
Sure. I suppose so. I'll confirm, but it doesn't seem.
I don't,
Seems
what
possible.
do we want to do here? Do we have any motions?
It's hard to be the assistant or vice or any.
I'd consider
I know everybody's
Commissioner
gonna do
Ofisi,
it.
but I don't think we can do that if she's not here.
I'll do it. I'll be vice.
I haven't heard
I
anything.
did not
from-
hear from her on this item.
Craig, I'll do
Would you be interested in revisiting this in 6 months?
I'm sorry, and
So
revisit.
we could continue your position and then revisit this in 6 months?
I'd be happy to continue. I mean, whatever.
Why don't we do, I'm inclined to make a motion to, and I will actually formally in just a moment, to make you obviously nominate you as the chair to continue in your role.
Okay.
But I wanted clarification, well, and then if you'd be open to, since you're. So I'll make a
Happy to, thank
motion that Commissioner John Simpson continue as chair of the Public Works and Sustainability Commission, and that Commissioner Cindy Arata be the vice chair of our commission.
Is there a second for
Second
that?
that motion.
A second, okay, I guess
Thank
we.
you.
Do we want to roll? Yeah, we want to roll call.
Do we
vote.
have to accept, would you like to accept the nomination formally?
Sure, thank you very much.
Okay,
Thanks. Thank you,
accepted?
Commissioner
I'll
Funabashi.
accept. So now we need a motion, right?
So we did have the motion in the second, right? And you both accepted, so we could do a roll call
Yeah,
vote?
let's do a roll call.
Any public comment?
Oh, thank you. Any comments from the public? I guess, and there's no one on Zoom, and I believe there's no e-comments. No.
Okay, so call the roll.
Commissioner Arata,
Aye.
Commissioner Funabashi,
Aye.
Commissioner Beely,
Aye.
Commissioner Sao,
Aye.
Chair Simpson.
Sure, I'll vote for myself. Aye.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so that takes us now to item L1. I suspect we have a presentation or two on this, do we not?
Yeah, I'll just begin us here. It's item I1, actually, although our.
Oh, I said L, that's an I, I'm
I1,
sorry.
Yeah. And this is a continued item from the meeting in September. And in response to a strategic plan item direction from the city council to discuss policy considerations for the use of pollinator species in city-controlled properties, both the right-of-way and city-owned parcels. Last month, we had Mike Garcia make a presentation to the group. And then tonight we have two additional professionals in this space from the South Bay Parkland Conservancy. Jim Light is here, and also Tracy Drake, who's with the city of Torrance and works in this landscape. So, sorry for the pun, this space. Jesse, do you have anything more to add before we turn it over? And we are looking for either tonight or at some other evening, if you choose to continue this item further, policy, guidelines, directions, recommendations that we can take to the city council for their deliberation about some future policy that we might have about use of pollinator species in these city-controlled spaces. So that's kind of what the end game here is tonight.
With that, I'll bring up Tracy Drake, Park Services Manager, Naturalist at the City of Torrance. She'll give a presentation first, and then Jim Light will follow with his presentation as well.
Good evening, Commissioners and Honorable Chair Simpson. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be amongst friends. Ted and I have known each other for a long time, and Mr. LaRock is now my boss, who came from here and said to say hi. So, anyway, just really nice to be a part of this community. I've been a part of this community for about 20 years. Was at the very beginning when Wilderness Park was starting to become habitat and be considered as really a go-to place in the South Bay for natives. So it's been fun to be a part of that process. I'm also a naturalist. I've been a naturalist for about 40 years, certified both by the California State Park System, where I was a naturalist, and also by the Berkeley iNaturalist group. So I have some, 2,400 species and about 70,000 observations in iNaturalist. So I'm going through the state and through the U.S. I'm a naturalist, but I'm a systems manager. I look at the way systems work, and I see, I try to emulate or copy those that I see in nature and bring them to parks and to the Madrona Marsh Preserve and to wherever I can, and really whoever will listen. So it's an honor to be here, and I hope to help you along a little bit with some thoughts. This is a presentation that's got a couple of aspects to it. When you're looking at the slides, the photos all came from observations that I have made here in the South Bay, mostly around Torrance. That's important, so the photos may have a story. Also, I have a couple of handouts for you. There's a lot of information that I'm going to pack into this little short couple of minutes. There's a bunch of links. One of which is the Long Beach Sustainability Program link, which I believe is a really good forward-thinking unit if you haven't already taken a look at that. There's also one on the urban forests, why diversity is critical, and it's about Matt Ritter, who is the leading urban forestry manager, is really concerned that we're not using enough diversity in our urban forest. Of course, that's going to be part of the plan. Information from the South Bay Parkland Conservancy is also critical in this discussion. CMPS benefits to native plants. There's going to be a lot of questions that are going to be asked, and that you may be the ones that need to answer, and those answers will be in there. Audubon, Why Plants Matter, the Meadow Project, and Nature's Best Hope from Doug Ptolemy. I'll get into that in a minute. And then the positive benefits of urban native landscapes, the importance of that. So you'll have all of that. There's a little bit, for those of you that are like me and very curious, there's an advanced knowledge section. So those who want to get an A in the class that's here. Got a couple of links for that one as well. There's a couple of other handouts that I'll be handing out as we get to them in the presentation. One is about keystone species. Those are that are most critical to put into the policy, and I'll explain why that's critical later. A little spotlight in invasive plants and why that's important to put in the policy, and also a little gift for you at the end. We'll save that for later. Okay, so basically what can be done when considering putting in pollinator gardens or pollinator landscaping? First of all, congratulations. Most people just want to do drought tolerant native plants. And that is, that kind of moves away from where your potential is. Moving towards potential is what you just did. You said pollinator gardens. So what can be done with your own direction in mind? You want to create and restore functional ecosystems citywide. Okay, and why is that important? those habitat corridors are really, really important. The pollinators are really important. Where we are, climate change is really important. All of those things inform this need to put together a functional ecosystem. I'll get to what that is exactly in a couple of minutes. Where in Redondo, your parkways and medians, your new developments in parks and property owned by the city and in schools. Okay. I took a pretty close look at your land use map, and as you can see, and as you already know, your parks and open spaces are limited. You have you have something here, though, that very few cities have, that we have in Torrance in the Madrona Marsh Preserve. You have the Parkland Conservancy, and you have Wilderness Park. That is going to be your key focal point for education and for contact for any movement forward. That's also where the people that will come to you to help move this project forward. So I recommend really leaning on the Wilderness Park project and also on the Southland Conservancy. And also looking at this, one of the things, the single family unit residential, that number, that really pops out at you as a color, and also your other residential. So there may be a really good opportunity here for incentivizing the program beyond the reduce your turf, but also just putting in native plants no matter where they happen to be. So I really see those as wide open areas where you can explore that other people aren't exploring that may really give you a lot of positive impact. Okay. Also, you have very nice, neat, and orderly medians. I wish we had those in Torrance, but we don't. But you have a lot of opportunities in medians, and that is certainly something to look at. In the policy, one of the things that is important to know that the way you manage open space, the way you manage parks, and the way you manage medians are very different. The laws are different, and your safety structure is very different. So when in Torrance, we have done medians with low plants, trees that don't need to be trimmed very often, make sure that you don't lose any view shed, and you have safe corridors for your vehicles to go by. So that consideration is basically it. Those things need to be considered for medians. You have a lot more leeway in open space and parks and in residential areas. Okay. How can your effort be meaningful and significant? In who I am, who Tracy is I like to move people and places toward their potential. And that's why I was really excited to be here, is because you had talked about pollinators. How do you do that? How can you do that as a group? One of the best ways to do is to look at the dreamers and understand their vision. The best ones are E.O. Wilson, Half Earth, the Half Earth Project. Have any of you guys heard about the Half Earth Project? Okay, no. E.O. Wilson is the leading naturalist of our time. He just recently passed at nearly 90 years old. And he basically, 35, 40 years ago said, listen, we need to pay attention to what we're doing because we are losing species at a really rapid rate. We need to have half for them and half for us, and that's it. And so he's been getting philanthropic people to buy up big plots of land so that there's habitat corridors from Canada to Mexico, starting in the east, and it's moving. Aldo Leopold, having a land ethic is really super important. We'll get to that in a moment. And Doug Tallamy, Nature's Best Hope is probably the keystone of where I am in this project. We are nature's best hope, and this is how we move forward by conversations like this. The new approach to conservation, I'd like you to delete the things that you know about conservation and start fresh from here, because we have learned that piecemealing conservation doesn't work. It didn't work at Madrona, it won't work here at Torrance, and it didn't work on the Bluffs when it was first started. But all of us working together and cooperatively moving forward does work. And while this is an Ackman blue butterfly, you know this by the PV blue or the Elsagoota blues that are coming to your Bluffs. The importance of connectivity as it relates to here, to Redondo Beach. You guys are like the monarch butterflies, right? You're a smaller city with a lot of power and a lot of understanding of what's going on. When a population is too small, the regular fluctuations in climate, in weather, in heat, in just construction, if regular fluctuations, all populations can ebb and flow and recover from. When a population is too small and there's an impact, then it cannot recover. That population cannot recover. And that's what's happening with the monarchs right now. So keeping yourself in mind as a monarch, then you really want to look towards your potential instead of meeting the goals of the laws that are coming or meeting the goals for sustainability, look at the larger picture and say, okay, let's do the best we can in the biggest way we can, staying within the parameters of your budget and the community, the people that you serve. So what happened there and what you don't want to have happen here is the habitat loss and fragmentation. Land use priorities shifted away from stewardship to use, okay, and all of the cities have done that. And so now's that time to go, I'm entitled to this, to it is my responsibility to, keeping all that in mind moving forward. So how can we create that connection to Redondo? Edge effect. Edge effect is one of the most important things in nature to learn about. Most things live on edges, okay? They prefer to be on the edge of the park, the edge of the freeway. All of that provides habitat and cover and a place to go out to hunt with and then come back to, so all of your birds. Those are really super important. Wildlife corridors through utilities, you're perfectly situated to connect to their cities. Turf grass removal, of course, is already in process. And then educate people and your workforce about the importance of reducing chemicals in landscapes. Why 40 to 60% of fertilizer ends up in our groundwater, most of which is carcinogenic. The other part of that is the key to a habitat or pollinator garden is the pollinators, and they're the ones that are most impacted by the use of chemicals. And so if you're going to head in that direction, chemicals really cannot be safely used in that way. What else? Shrink-alongs wherever possible. Over at these pictures are from the Civic Center over at the West Annex at City of Torrance. I put that in about a year and a half ago. On Friday, I was thinking about this. Thursday, I was thinking about this presentation. I had my iPhone out and I saw 6 different species of butterflies. You know, those pollinators are absolutely critical in the system. So it's really important and to educate people about it and provide opportunities for people to learn. Learn about and provide classes in Homegrown National Park Program, Doug Tallamy. This is where I'd like you to spend a little bit of time in the handouts that I give you and the links that I give you. Doug Tallamy is a visionary who has realized that through this type of program that you're doing, we can come together as communities, not only for our public places, but in private enterprises and go towards the Homegrown National Park Program. Basically, that means creating seasonality in gardens so that you do have the ebb and flow that happens to provide people with a way to easily connect with nature, not only in their homes, but in your public spaces, to talk about the health benefits of nature. Shoot, there's doctors right now prescribing people to go out in nature to feel better and plant native pollinator-friendly plants and trees. This Cooper's hawk that was on the fence at Madrona a week ago. Okay. One of the things in consideration of your policy is are non-native plants bad? This is a question you will be asked, and the answer is yes, they can be. The plant to your left, there is Nacella. It's a Mexican feathergrass, and they are not yet listed as a invasive species by the California Invasive Plant Council, but they will be at some point. So it's really important to take a look at these plants. When you have a question yourself or another person has a question, then these type of forms, you can download this really easily. These plants, this plant, you're going to get a form and it has a little bit about the plant.
Yeah, we need a motion to receive.
I'll make a
and
motion
file.
to receive and file.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You'll see people have put in this grass. You've probably seen it literally everywhere. It's popping up everywhere. It's extremely invasive in gardens. What's really neat, when you go to the California Invasive Plant Council website, on the second part of their PDF, it has the alternatives for it. So, and the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of times when we're doing these projects, we're going to contract out to a landscape architect who's going to put this in your landscape, because it's important to listen to naturalists as well as architects, because they love the plant. It looks cute when it's done. It does really well. But as a naturalist, I know how invasive it is and how impossible it is going to get out. So when you do start these projects, please make sure you have, if you are going to contract, you have contractors and naturalists working together on your policy, and you have this access to yourself immediately. Monoculture, it has no habitat value, even if it's a native, so it's important to put diversity in. Insects use native plants, and they're a link up the food web. So why is what you're thinking about pollinator gardens so important? Insects are almost everything that is eaten on this planet eats plants, starts with the plants that you do. Most of those things are insects. Insects are then eaten by almost every mammal and also people on the planet. So that cornerstone is really super important to consider. Please don't move away from pollinator gardens. Please put in plants that are important pollinator plants. And you can simply look up, like there's Westringia for Super Dracosa out front here. Look that up. 0 habitat value. It's beautiful, but it doesn't have any habitat value. So you really want to think, do I want it to meet the goal or do I want it to be beneficial? When you can put something just as equally beautiful there and it has value and you get butterflies, then or insects, then there you have it. There's a lot of specialization that occurs in native systems. For example, going back to the monarch must use the milkweed unless you're a striated queen who is a mimic of a monarch. And they are specifically set up to pollinate those plants. And our animals are specifically set up to eat those plants, to eat those insects. So that's how come the system works really super well. Don't count as a pollinator European honeybee. They do pollinate, but you want the native pollinators to come back as well. So if you're looking at, like I do use a lot of Callistum and Little John. It's a little bottle brush, beautiful plant. I use it quite a bit because it's very sustainable in a garden for people who don't garden a lot. But it's only pollinated by honeybees. So it's not really, doesn't really have that habitat value. And then speak about habitat enhancement, not necessarily restoration, because we can't go back to what it used to be here. We can only use our knowledge to do the best we can to enhance the habitats that we've got. Okay. These are, this is another accepted file. These are the links that I'm providing you. Have already discussed those with you. And then Jesse will email you.
Got a motion to receive and file?
There's 3.
Second.
Let me keep one of each.
All in favor? Aye.
Here, you want to give these? Might as well give them all. Oh, I need a copy of the links one. I cannot, there's so much to learn. I mean, I've spent my lifetime learning all of this. There's so much to learn. I really recommend calling us back and having a discussion. And also as you move forward and as you have questions, reach out to your extremely good staff over here and have them reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you move forward. And there's a lot of people we're not alone. There's quite a few people who understand this. So these are the links. You're going to also get this in the mail, so it'll be clickable as well. Okay. Now what? Where do you go from here? I've given you a whole bunch of information. Where do you go? Again, go back to Doug Tallamy's Nature's Best Hope. Can you activate that link? Maybe copy and paste it into the browser. No, it's not letting you do much. Oh, it's not browsable. You can just go on to. Copy.
Control.
Browse YouTube is okay. It'll go there. It's on YouTube.
So you want
The bottom one that says browse YouTube,
to, no, I don't.
yeah, that'll work too. Sorry for the delay.
There it is. Okay.
Okay, this is just a little primer. Sorry for the ad. Did not get that out of there. Okay, skip ad.
Let's put the lid down.
Okay, this is a little summary.
That's not a bad guy, saw that commercial.
I think it went to the end. Yeah, it did. No sound. Okay, That's okay, we'll let it go. You can go take a look at that one alone, but basically it says the same things that I just said about how things go up the food chain and how important it is to include those in your process. Okay. With that, one of the things that is in there is, and one of the things that Doug Tallamy talks about is to take into consideration keystone native plants. If you recall from your architecture, the keystone is on an arch. That stone that holds the entire arch together, that stone is also in nature. You have a handout here, the keystone native plants for our area. It is important to include keystone species in each of your plantings. And these are the ones that are going to attract the most pollinators to your gardens. The Quercus family, all the oaks are your number one species that you can plant. So it would be important to get those into this area. Quercus agrifolia, or the coast live oak, is the most important one for our area. There's another slide after this, but I'm wondering if at this point, now that I've flooded information, if you have any questions. You think I can
Questions on
answer
that?
for you?
No.
No?
Not
You're
a-
out.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay. One of the things that I again, was really moved by your asking me to come here and really wanted to put this together for you. And this is a hard process that you're going through. There's a lot of change and a lot of things that are going on. Hope is a thing with feathers. Emily Dickinson, for this program. For this program, hope is a thing with wings is more appropriate. Hope is a thing with wings that perches on the soul and sings with a tune without words, and it never stops at all. And I hope that you guys hang on to that as you proceed forward. One way that I can provide that to you is I'm providing you how to successfully grow wildflowers. We're coming into the rainy season. Practice at your own yards. Have your own experience with them, and then follow these directions, because you can't just put them as regular seeds in your garden. But this will give you good practice and be able to answer questions other people come up with. Okay, and with that, if there are no other questions.
I have a question for
Go
the
ahead.
city. I have a question for the city. So, I think from a sustainability and environmental standpoint, we have a moral obligation to protect our pollinators. I mean, absolutely, especially for our city. So does the city have any policies around like weed ordinances? Because I've been doing a lot of research on that, and a lot of cities have adopted things in terms of controlling weed growth, like noxious weeds and things of that nature, because clearly those things directly conflict
Yes.
with what we're talking about here. What are some things to consider from that standpoint?
In the consideration, the most important thing is when you put in a new landscape, that you factor in 3 years of maintenance to it, whether that's staff maintenance or contract maintenance, because once you first start watering those, the seed bank is going to put weeds out, and those weeds are adapted to water, so they'll outcompete your natives. So the 3 years of maintenance is super important. Also, we do as much weed abatement as we can by hand, and with tools, rather than the use of chemicals. Now, there are times when we have to use Roundup. It's very seldom. Most everything we deal with on our own. Those are the two most important ones.
Go ahead.
I do have one question for you. So Biona Wetlands, Wilderness Park, would you say that the same native species would thrive throughout the city that are in like Biona Wetlands and Wilderness Park?
Not
When we
Biona
take that into
because-
consideration?
Bayona is a saltwater or a brackish marsh. The wetlands is, so it's, if you're talking about the potential of the area here by the power plant, yes, that would be similar species. But throughout the city, you're really going to be looking at more of the coastal prairie and the coastal scrub plants than you will the Bayona wetlands plants.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I have one. For the, for the tree list, you have like a bunch of the elders and birch. Do these trees have like a deep root system? Will they mess up like people's sewer lines or anything like that? I mean, what's a decent one that's not going to tear up the sidewalks or whatnot, the bigger it gets?
All of the ones that you see as natives are set up to go through long periods of drought, and so they automatically deep root, have a deep root system. The sycamores, elders, poplars, all of those are are reasonable, unlike the ones that are, the ficuses and the shallow rooted plants are the ones that surface feed, and native trees don't do that. So they're typically deep rooted. Also, the way you plant will inform the way the roots go down. So if you need to put barriers up to help plants go down, that will work as well.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Questions from staff?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tracy. Mr. Light.
Thank you. Good to see you guys. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate being invited, and I'm humbled by the company of the others that have briefed you before. Mike Garcia is an innovator who's been doing this commercially on private property for years, and we collaborate with him quite a bit. And Tracy's been a legend, that we try to model ourselves after in SBPC. So you've had some good advice, some good speakers. So I'm humbled to be in their presence. So my name's Jim Light. I'm the president of the South Bay Parkland Conservancy. And I'm a California naturalist as well, although I had 40 years in the aerospace industry, so don't hold that against me. Let's go to the next slide. So what Jesse asked me to talk about was pollinator corridors and landscaping recommendations with respect to commercial and residential properties and city properties. So that's what I'll cover tonight. 10 to 15 minutes isn't much to cover. Is not enough time to cover this detailed topic, but I'll try to skim over the high points. And I'm available for consultation or discussions with anybody, at your desire. And I will start with a quick SBPC intro, very quick. So if we could go to the next slide. So South Bay Parkland Conservancy, or SBPC, is a nonprofit. It was formed by our mayor in 2004, long before he was mayor, and originally to address what happens with the power plant if the power plant shuts down, and what to do with the property and the wetlands that are there. Our mission is to preserve, enhance, and expand parkland throughout the South Bay. We have 4 strategic thrusts: restore and expand native habitat, although listening to Tracy, I'll drop the term restore and say enhance, because she's right. We can't go back. Establish the Redondo Beach Community Garden, which we just opened earlier this year. We do still want to influence public policy, and me being here tonight is one of those opportunities to do that. And then educate the public. Education is one of our big thrusts in the organization. Next slide. If I would have talked to you in 2018 and probably most of the way through 2019, there would have just been one spot that we were doing rewilding projects, and that would have been Wilderness Park. But you can see since then, I'm not going to go through each of these sites, but we have sites ranging from Alondra Park all the way down to the Esplanade Bluff restoration, which we've taken over from LA Conservation Corps with funding from U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So we are expanding rapidly, and it's exciting to do that because we're all volunteers and we're getting more and more community members helping and getting smart on this stuff. So it's been an exciting several years, the past few years. Next slide. So the first thing when we're talking about corridors, one of our main things is saving the endangered El Segundo blue butterfly. If you've never seen it, it's about the size of a thumbnail. It's very small, has a very short breeding season from May to July, although that seems to be shifting with climate change. And it has one host plant, which is why it's endangered, and that's the seacliff buckwheat. That plant was lost largely due to development and invasive plants like ice plant that got thrown out on our bluffs. So one of the goals, we're part of the El Segundo Blue Butterfly Coalition. We're looking to link the small populations that exist today. And we have a concern there, and there is a gap in Redondo, and I'll cover that in the next few slides. Next slide. So this slide shows where the populations are today. There's a population up in PV. Since we've started restoring the bluff, and LACC started restoring the bluff in Torrance Beach and Redondo, they have returned to that site. They are the Chevron facility in El Segundo. They're in those dune area below the airport, and then they're at Bologna wetlands. And those are the disparate populations. They're very small. The goal, the reason we want to link them is for genetic diversity and resiliency. So if something happens to one population, they're linked and we're flowing the genes back and forth. So expanding that habitat and expanding their genetic diversity by connecting the populations. So next slide. So right now we've got the bluff restoration project that will go up ultimately to the base of the library, the old Veterans Park Library. Then we are starting to restore the Hermosa Greenbelt. So you go across Redondo and we're starting that connectivity. And then one of our partners, the Bay Foundation, is doing a dune restoration project in Manhattan Beach. So there's one area called the Redondo Gap. I call it the Redondo Gap that we need to address. And it's not an easy one because there's not a natural corridor there that we can just say we're going to restore the whole, not restore, enhance the habitat there to support the El Segundo blue. So if you go to the next slide, this goes into it a little bit more. You can see on the right is Redondo, where we would meet up with the Greenbelt in Hermosa Beach. And on the left is the bluffs, where the bluffs end at the bottom of Veterans Park. So there's a connectivity gap. We need a solution that has islands of habitat. We're targeting a gap of 1/4 mile maximum. The most that has been documented, the El Segundo blue migrating to a new habitat, is a 1/2 mile. And that was actually a surprise to biologists. They thought they'd only go 100 yards. So 1/2 mile is the most we've seen. The biologists we've talked to would like a 1/4 mile maximum. So next slide. So in yellow here, what you see is a solution we're advocating. We've talked with city staff a little bit on this, is a corridor of habitat between the bluff and the Hermosa Greenbelt. And that includes the medians along Catalina. That's a strong corridor there where we can put habitat in there, mainly the sea cliff buckwheat, so that you can have those stepping stones for the El Segundo blue. But there's also other property throughout there. We could do portions of Veterans Park. We're not talking about doing the whole thing. There's the landscaping at the bottom of Torrance Boulevard as you get into the pier area. Zuliger Park, we could set aside sections of Zuliger Park to make connectivity. And obviously City Hall here in the library is big turf area. There was a drought tolerant garden here. This is an opportunity to reintroduce the plants that are critical to the El Segundo blue. The Redondo median too, there's a median coming up Redondo. There's a bike path transition park, that you go from Hermosa to Redondo. That's grass right now and turf. We could redo that. And then there's different landscaping areas throughout the harbor. So we think if we did a program where we connected all of those, we would solve that gap in Redondo. So that's one of the connectivity. The second, and Tracy brought this up, the monarch butterfly. We are an overwintering site for monarch butterflies. A lot of people think our butterflies go all the way to Mexico. The western population stops in the central and southern coast of California. And we are an overwintering site. There's one fairly new one at the Hermosa Greenbelt. There's one at Wilderness Park, and there's one at the where PV and Torrance hit. So those are local congregation sites. El Nido, I don't have it on this map, but El Nido Park is a known overwintering site as well. So overwintering monarchs you don't want them to breed actually. They're there to survive long enough so that they can migrate back. So what you want is pollinator plants that will bloom from late fall to early spring to give them food, and they will forage as far as 5 miles. So any of those sites, you draw a 5 mile radius, any pollinator plants that bloom during the winter months would feed them. So, and they need that to survive. So next slide. So some habitat corridors for monarchs and others. The North Redondo bike path is a huge opportunity there, and I think a wasted opportunity. There are some spots where the city did some landscaping. It's not all native, but a lot of it's native. And we could pick the right plants so that there would be blooming in each season. 190th Street right-of-way, our ultimate vision would be to turn that into a green belt to the sea, so it can bring North Redondo down to the harbor area and ultimately to the beaches. The next one, wherever Redondo Beach has parkland and public property, we can set aside portions of that. You don't have to do the whole thing and create pollinator habitats there. There's also the school district sumps. There's Wiley Sump. There's other sumps that we could enhance. I gotta watch myself, Tracy. And then mediums, like we talked about along corridor, those are a missed opportunity. You'd want to mix the pollinator plants so that there are blooming flowers throughout the year to support all pollinators, not just monarchs or just not the El Segundo blue. And as Tracy said, you want to avoid invasives. And we actually, the science isn't settled on this, but we actually advocate staying away from tropical milkweed. Science is out on that, and there's different minds of thought, but our view is we should put in the native milkweeds wherever possible, and we've raised them in several of our projects very successfully. Next slide. As far as landscaping on private property, and this applies to any of it, and it actually applies to city property, we did an evaluation of the different alternatives for landscaping, and we evaluated against the amount of water you use, whether it generates microplastic pollution, whether it contributes or helps urban heating, because that is a growing problem in our area, how it impacts the local ecosystems, whether there's chemical pollutants involved with the alternative, and whether it helps sequester waters into the aquifer and purify the water going into the aquifer. And applied scores from 0 to 10, 0 being really bad and 10 being the best you can be. And what you see there, I won't go through each of these, but artificial turf is like the lowest by far. And the best, the highest scoring is obviously native plants. And you can see the range in between. And it's a big gap when you go from the native plants to the next alternative. So we obviously push native plants as much as possible. And here's a quick comparison. So loss of habitat is helping to contribute to the 6th mass extinction here on Earth. And by rewilding urban green spaces, we can support our local ecosystem. So here's an example of one of the most invasive plants that are commonly known in our areas, and that's ice plant. It was put out there by the railroads and Department of Transportation from before the turn in the 1900s up until actually into the 60s and probably later. I think there's still some DOT projects that they throw ice plant out on. That is a natural host for 0 of our native insects and butterflies. It's from South Africa, actually. And juxtaposing it against seacliff buckwheat, which is the host species for the El Segundo blue, just that one plant is a potential host for up to 44 different native species. And you start to mix these different plants together, and you can see why it goes from the monoculture on the left, which is barren to our local pollinators and insects, to you start putting together multiple native plants, and you've got hundreds of species that are supported with a relatively few number of species. So that starts to paint why we're advocating for these kind of changes. Next slide. So recommendations for commercial and residential properties is one, we would prefer mandating a minimum percentage of Southern California native plants, establishing city native tree palettes, plant palettes for trees, shrubs, and plants, and some choices that address sunny, shady, dry, bioswale environments, and even some ground cover and turf palettes to replace what, the invasive species and exotic species that we put in for our lawns. Encouraging a mix of pollinators to ensure year-round blooms, and west of PCH, encouraging that seacliff buckwheat be one of the plants of choice for that El Segundo blue butterfly. One of the things I think we're weak on is, if you've read our green streets, we talk about bioswales in there, but there's nothing mandating anybody to go to it. I think it's in the commercial. If there's new commercial projects, you require bioswales. But we think that, since we're getting in this big boom with the state laws on housing, should be mandating that we're creating bioswales as those new projects go in. For the along the roads, on the driveways, and any parking lots. I have mandate there, but that's a little strong. I think we should encourage recirculating pollinator water features so that they can get water wherever it's feasible. I know some lawns are too small to do that, but wherever possible, because these things need to drink. Not necessarily on the native track, but allowing vegetable gardens is a better use than just turf lawns. And then prohibiting and limiting use of invasive plants, as Tracy described, use of fertilizers and insecticides, and landscaping that increases urban heating. Artificial turf is known. It can get up to 165, in one study, 204 degrees in the sun. And then artificial turf itself, just outlining that. There was a law just passed, I think it was last month, and signed that says that cities can now ban artificial turf. And then on irrigation, requiring the use of water-saving irrigation where you need it. And these are the kind of irrigation we install on our projects, and Mike Garcia actually advocates for a lot of these too. MP rotators, Zeri or micro sprays, drip irrigation, and even underground drip irrigation to help save water. Next slide. City and school properties, public properties, it's not much of a change on that theme. You know, you mandate the minimum percentage on all new projects, establish and mandate pallets that should be used, and prioritize. This is a little different, prioritize a program of conservation of current landscaping over time. You're not going to do it all at once, so do it little chunks at a time. Where possible in the city, install some recirculating pollinator fountains. There are places in the city where turf is desirable, where possible replace with, there are native turfs, there's drought tolerant turfs, and there's low maintenance turfs that you can use to replace that. And again, same prohibitions, same recommendations for irrigation. Because it is public, we would also implement interpretive signage to increase education on the native plants. And we would specifically target underutilized open spaces that people don't normally access anyway, things like medium sumps and now the power line rights of way. Next slide. So summary and conclusions, native habitat expansion is the most sustainable path forward and provides multiple benefits for the community and for our ecosystems. We strongly advocate migration of Redondo landscaping to these islands and corridors of native plant habitat. We strongly advocate elimination of the gap in the El Segundo blue butterfly habitat corridor. And we, just like Tracy, we offer our help however we can help the city in any way to help define pallets, to help build ordinances or policy. We've done that in the past, and we offer to do that in the future. I have some backup slides in this, but the time doesn't permit me to go into it. So I'm open for any questions you might have right now.
I have one. I'm going to display my ignorance. What's a bioswale?
A bioswale is where, you know, right now we've got the curb,
Right.
the green grass right away, or some places it's cement, and then the sidewalk.
Right.
So a bioswale is where you actually divert the flow or allow the flow that would normally go along the curb of stormwater to go into the ground and then be sequestered and infiltrated into our aquifers. And you can plant all sorts of plants, but we'd advocate native plants that would tolerate that kind of seasonal flooding and help, you know, just help move the whole thing to a more natural state. Stormwater runoff's big problem, as you all know. We're pushing microplastics, oils, and everything into the ocean, and this would help sequester it into our aquifer, which we have to fill up anyway, and we're, you know, the sources of fresh water are dwindling as the state grows.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, how many of the blue butterfly habitats are open to the public?
So the most accessible one is the one right at the end of, right around Miramar Park, if you know where that is, the end of the Esplanade. There's Seacliff buckwheat right up against the fence, and when they're out there, once you see them, you can't unsee them. They're everywhere when they come out in season. There's PV, you can see them. You have to know where to go. And Bologna wetlands, they'll let you in for tours at certain times because that's a closed off wetlands.
That's not really open to the public.
Right, it is on like Saturday and twice a month or something like that. But yeah, you can't just drive up and walk through it. So, and it would be tough to find the Seacliff buckwheat if you didn't know where it was located too. But the easiest one, and we give tours when they're open, we give walks and we advertise them on our site, is right there at Miramar Park, the end of the Esplanade there. And when they're out, once you see them, they're everywhere. Then one day the junior lifeguards were coming up to them. They didn't even realize they're walking through this whole cloud of endangered species, and they didn't even realize it.
What time of the year do they come out?
So between May and July. This year was a little late because we had so much fog, you know, and it delayed the blooming of the Seacliff buckwheat.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This is a very important topic. It's an honor to be here, and thank you to staff for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Bravo. I did have a couple of questions, though, from staff. And I know Public Works does not necessarily interact when it comes to plan check and residential construction and things like that, but how much is the city influencing the developers, certainly when it comes to the landscaping aspect to a property, to really be pushing these types of plantings? And I mean, I see some of the new construction is reflecting some of that, but I'm wondering how much of an active role is the city already taking in trying to influence the builders and the developers when it comes to the landscaping?
You're correct. We don't, in Public Works and Engineering, we don't deal with the private property development that much. I do know that we have residential design guidelines that include watering and irrigation requirements, and it may drift into bioswales and that kind of thing as well. I think in engineering, we have an opportunity because a lot of big commercial type projects are often required to do what we call offsite improvements or improvements in the right of way. And we can ask for certain things, certain conditions to be met as they redevelop a bigger property. So that's where our opportunity lies, I think, in the engineering world. And the private property, of course, is the provision of the planning commission and the
Planning Commission.
community development department, the planning commission.
Community development, absolutely. And yet we have so much public property that when you start talking about medians and the islands that go up in, like whether it's Catalina or Artesia Boulevard or just, you know, what little spaces we can kind of work at from a public works standpoint. The other thing that kind of came to mind was really how we mandate versus how do we strongly encourage? I mean, where is the economics of the cost of these plants versus some of the more traditional plants? You know, I know that's not something that we necessarily have control over, but back to what we can do at Public Works to obviously encourage these types of plantings and things in our public ways. The last question I had to do with our interaction with Edison, for example, who is generally the right-of-way, and yet Chevron, it seems, I remember years ago, I think Chevron was advertised, this was probably 20, 30 years ago when they were trying to bring back the blue butterfly. Chevron put a lot of money in because it was a great PR campaign for them as well, right? But I think, don't they have gas pipelines that are part of that right-of-way as well? I guess what I'm getting at is, what kind of help can we get from the utilities, and how amenable are they to spending money to develop some of this right-of-way stuff on their dime, knowing that it's the right thing to do and that they own or have control of these significant properties, certainly throughout North Redondo and the right-of-way along 190th. And then even how we collaborate with the city of Torrance because of those right-of-ways carrying over. What can we do as a municipality collectively to pull in the utilities? So I don't know that you have the answer. I just wanted to put that out there in the forum.
Yeah, I think with the utility corridors, especially Edison's, the city is licensed to use what's now occupied by a bike path and landscaping in North Redondo, and fairly recently the property just immediately east of the power plant on the south side of Redondo. So in the latter case, we're in a design process right now, undergoing SCE review for a landscaping effort there that includes, I'm not sure of all the species, but Jim has reviewed our plan and provided comment for us on that. So yeah, that's kind of waiting for Edison to give us the blessing to go ahead. And we have that project funded, or at least partially funded anyway. And we'll be implementing that when all those stars align. Hopefully with Edison, that'll be sooner than later, but we've been waiting a long time for some things for their review. So that's the Edison contribution.
Awesome. I'm just glad you got the ball rolling because I know how long these things can take.
I don't think they're quite as motivated as a Chevron, for instance, because they are governed, regulated by the CPUC and have ratepayer cases to make. And so they don't have quite the liberty of kind of those public campaign programs that an unregulated company like Chevron
Sure,
might
sure,
have.
the differences there.
Great.
Thank you.
I have a question for the city. So from a landscaping point of view, does the city or Public Works have any policies around like chemical use and, use of pesticides? I know like City of Long Beach restricts like glyphosate herbicides. Irvine has, specific, bans on toxic pesticides and use. Is that your jurisdiction? Is that something are there policies around that?
Yeah, I'm going to let Ted, I'm going to ask Ted to answer that question.
Yeah, there aren't written policies. We have stopped using Roundup as an example a couple of years ago. And our staff does look to use more eco-friendly materials and what have you, but it's not a written policy per se.
I know a lot of cities are trying to oppose the congressional bill, the HR 7266, which is trying to restrict cities on, policing the use of chemicals. And so this is like a big discussion right now among cities. So I'm just curious of what Redondo stands on stuff like that.
Yeah, like I said, from an operational perspective for the Department of Public Works and the maintenance and oversight of parks and medians and what have you, yes, that's a working policy, not necessarily a written policy that's applied to the general public or to commercial properties in that manner.
Okay, thanks.
So we've had two very interesting and enlightening presentations. And now I'm sort of, what are we now supposed to be doing?
We still need to take
We're supposed to
public
be
comment.
developing policies or suggestions for policies?
You want to go to our recommendation
we-
page?
We still need to take public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we have a couple of speakers.
Okay. Do we have,
We have Karen McCarthy and then Maybell McCarthy. You'll be next.
Hi, my name is Karen McCarthy, and I'm a resident of Redondo Beach. I just followed up on this topic. On your last meeting, we happened to be clicking through the cable channels and saw that you guys were meeting about native plants, and I wanted to speak tonight in support of planting native and pollinator attracting plants throughout the public spaces in our city. Even the smallest areas of these plants can begin to act as stepping stones and corridors that help connect larger areas of natural habitats, just like Tracy and Jim have presented tonight. Collectively, this plays a big role in supporting migrating pollinator populations. My family has witnessed this on a small scale, growing milkweed to help support the monarch population. If over the years we've seen the benefit that just a few pots of plants can make, imagine the impact we can see if we begin to utilize the unused spaces in our city. We have also seen this transformation in action with the work of the South Bay Parkland Conservancy, where once barren pieces of land are now teeming with life. Unfortunately, in our own small experience at home, we have seen a decline in the numbers of pollinators, especially this year. This is where your role becomes vital. You hold an important position as community leaders to set the tone for the entire South Bay. Redondo Beach can help take the lead by making these small shifts to build a healthier community and environment on all levels. It's an exciting opportunity. I'm very happy to see this discussion happening in our city, and I hope it continues. And I do hope you support this effort. Thanks for your consideration, your time and service to our city. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mabel McCarthy. I'm Karen McCarthy's daughter. I'm in 5th grade, and coincidentally in school we are learning about pollinators. Without pollinators, there is no food, and no one wants to go hungry. I'm a witness to pollinator decline myself. You see, we grow milkweed, and this year we have only had 3 successful caterpillars turn into monarch butterflies, versus when I was younger, we had 30 to 50 a year. With fewer butterflies, there's less eggs, and less eggs means less caterpillars to successfully turn into butterflies. So, it's an endless cycle of decline, but we can still change that. This is where you come in. Planting native plants will play a major role in helping support native pollinators that rely so heavily on these plants. Even though Redondo is just one city, even the slightest efforts can go a long way. Why let unused land go to waste and it can be used for something better? Thank you.
Well done.
So now this is, the staff recommendation is to recommend policy guidelines on this topic for city council to consider. I mean, do we think we can offer up guidelines tonight? In this, would we be better to maybe have a subcommittee draft some things and bring it back to the full commission to approve and modify, or?
Chair Simpson, I think all the above is essentially elements that are before you tonight for your consideration. I think you've heard so much testimony, so much information being thrown at you. It'll be a challenge for you to put recommendations tonight, I believe. And there's recommendations that you're going to be making not only to the city council, but some that may need to go to the planning commission and the community development department for their consideration on impacts to private property. They may have some of those effects, as we've talked about, commercial and potentially even residential properties. So that may be something for the commission to consider, creating your own subcommittee to sort of mull over this, come up with a few iterations of recommendations, come back at a future date for further consideration with the full commission before you recommend that to move forward, like I said, to either the planning commission and or to the city council for further consideration.
I would be hard pressed to come up with proposed guidelines tonight, other than these are very beneficial and it's important that we do everything we can to encourage that more of them are being planted, but I'm not quite sure how that broad general sentiment gets translated into guidelines, I guess.
Right. And it may become a broad general sentiment that gets refined as time goes, and maybe it's a direction that we incorporate something more in conversations with some of our experts out there. That may be the direction from the commission, but it is before you to consider all of the above for how to move forward.
Well, I think myself that, I mean, we might want to get a subcommittee that had the time and the wherewithal to maybe meet with Jim Light in some specific ideas and then come back with a draft guidelines that we could then discuss and add to and modify as we thought might be appropriate. Is that?
Could very well be, and you can invite, like you said, whether it be Mr. Light or Tracy or anyone, Mike Garcia or anyone else, to try to assist you in trying to refine it. We obviously don't want this to be too specific. We want to have a broad sense of, or provided broad enough so that it allows landscape architects and others to sort of come up with things that vary and they're not all consistently the same. Nevertheless, I think they can offer that guidance of how to manipulate that verbiage so that you can provide the guidance, yet specific enough language that achieves what is being looked at to achieve.
And I would just add that the other layer to this is that what you present will go to the council, who they may have additional process. They may want the planning commission to weigh in, for instance, or some of the parks.
Well, I would think for the
Parks
private
Commission.
property, the planning commission has to weigh
Or
in.
Park and Rec Commission, for instance, to weigh in. So I don't know that you need to feel like you've got to solve it all. It's a really big topic, of course, affecting many of the city's operations. But certainly in the space of public works, I think that's where the council would be looking for the recommendations from this commission.
How would we like to proceed? Would we like to do it? Yes.
Well, I mean, we're in the brainstorming process here, but would it be too much to consider that we recommend 100% of those spaces to be all native and also for 100% of those to be eco-friendly? So to change some policies so that going forward, that's what happens.
I'm not sure that that's a recommendation that you want to make. 100% of a park, as an example, is not necessarily going to give you a park that's going to be for multi-uses and multi-events,
Yeah, but no,
right?
just the portions that are.
Well, that's exactly why I think the chair is looking for potentially a subcommittee to sort of mull over this. Go get specific input from your experts to try to come up with something broad enough, yet gives you the flexibility to utilize spaces. And thank you, Andy, for mentioning not just the planning commission, but the Rec and Parks Commission, because they're going to have a say in our recreational areas and how they'd like to see that integrated into the parks.
Well, let me reiterate. Would it be too much to ask that all the plantage be native? That all the plants that go in are going forward are native, rather than non-native, because it's so.
Commissioner Arata, I actually do see that as a big ask, and I'll tell you why. Because there's a lot of other underlying questions, things like how often, I see the city going out and redoing plantings every season, and usually this time of year, and then there's mulching and all the different services. So we don't, to know what the percentage of new plants going in every year. Having that hardline number, then to be able to back up and go, okay, what would be the cost if we went with all native or appropriate plants like we're discussing tonight versus maybe what we have been planting up till now? There's economic impacts, which, we just need to understand before we say, yeah, let's go 100%. If we had all the money in the world, yeah, we would switch it all out, right? Or certainly to the, extent.
Brainstorm.
So, does the city have, do we know how much of the planting that the city is doing is the sorts of plants that are pollinating plants and desirable and we should be doing? And are we putting a lot of invasive things out there now, like ice plant was done previously? Are we doing that as a city?
Ice plant was also used as a fire suppression around wood buildings and stuff too.
Yeah,
Especially in high fire areas and stuff. So
right.
Doing 100%
Would seem to be an agreement that that's something that we shouldn't be planning now, right? Is that, that's.
I would talk to somebody in the fire department before to make that call.
Yeah, so
I think a holistic assessment probably needs to be done along your lines, Chair, is that we need to look, there are a lot of moving parts. There's from educational standpoint that they mentioned today regarding public. We need to look at all the public domain and land areas in which we would have to consider the planters and things of that nature.
So if we, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
It sounds to me as though we are moving in the direction of coming up with a subcommittee. And then the subcommittee would come back with more specific, after you've dug into it deeply and so on. Now, I guess if it's a subcommittee, it can't be more than three?
Can't be more than 3.
And it could be 2. I suppose it could be 1 even. Now, is anyone interested in being on such a subcommittee?
I would be.
Okay. Vice Commissioner Arata, anyone else?
I would be.
There we have 3.
Perfect.
And how much time do we think you would need to do this?
I would say you don't have to give them, you don't have to answer that question tonight because you don't know until you start to dig into this, how much.
But I do have a question because of 2 wonderful presentations. And I really, Tracy, for all the work that you've done with the city, and Jim, South Bay Parkland Conservancy. That one bullet point of your suggestions, whether it's mandate, strongly encourage, lean in a little bit, whatever word, but I think as a commission, I think we all agree that we support this because of the sustainability and the necessity to do it.
Right.
And it's just crafting something concise. And, but if we had access to those presentations, the PowerPoints and whatnot, I think with giving credit where credit is due, that we would probably follow some of the lines of the suggestions that were made tonight in the presentations. We could probably get a lot of the good stuff right out of that and just tighten it up a little bit.
We'd be willing to meet with you too, because there's more beneath those few words that, in the short time.
So, all right, well, do we need a motion to appoint the subcommittee, or?
Yes.
Okay, would somebody like to move that the 3 commissioners who are interested become the subcommittee?
I'll make a motion that our commission start a subcommittee to discuss
You can read the
requirements for native
recommendation.
planting and pollinators in the public right-of-way, city-owned property and development standards on commercial properties. To kind of cut and paste from what our topic discussion is this evening, and to have our 3 named commissioners as part of that.
Somebody-
Chairperson, why don't we go ahead and rename the 3 commissioners so that it's on the record, which ones? I think we've heard some of you speak, not necessarily that say that Commissioner Arata and the other commissioners volunteered, just to put their names on
Just
the
in your
record.
motion, just add their names to your motion.
Okay. Then I will add, and forgive me, with their name, I'll ask each of you to speak, to say your name and as a volunteer for the commission.
Commissioner Chow.
Commissioner Beely.
Really?
Commissioner Arata.
Takes us at least 1 meeting to get to remember the names.
Oh, it'll take at least 2.
It'll take a while.
So,
Thank you.
that's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll go ahead and second the motion.
Okay, is there any public discussion? Any email discussion? I don't think there could possibly be.
There's
at
no
this time.
e-comments and no one on Zoom that would like to speak.
Okay, so do we need a roll call? Why? We don't need a roll call.
Commissioner Arata?
Aye.
Commissioner Funbashi?
Aye.
Commissioner Beely?
Aye.
Commissioner Zhao?
Aye.
Chair Simpson?
Aye. Now, I guess it's up to the the subcommittee to agree a time to meet and et cetera, and figure out when you think you'll be coming back to us at some point.
It might be good to get an outline from staff as to how you can communicate with each other. I think with just the 3 of you, it's not a Brown Act violation, I don't believe, for you to be corresponding as just the 3 of you, so.
But I think you should be corresponding with your city emails, assuming you all have them now.
For sure.
I have one, yes.
Yeah, you should be using that because this would all be public record and
City business.
Maybe Chair, do you want to ask your subcommittee, you want to set a date for them to come back and give you an update, a status update? That could be November, December, we're going to be talking about a little bit later, that could be January. That's something that you as a commission now can sort of set in motion
why don't
what
we,
those expectations
do we
are.
need a motion to? I would suggest that they be given until the January meeting. Is that agreeable? Do we need a motion? Or is that just sort of direction?
Well, I think there's so many variables of like availability, the experts, like topics to discuss.
Not necessarily the final, just an update on
Oh,
where
yeah,
things
sure.
are.
Yeah, I think that's an expectation that you can set right now, that you'd like them to come back with a status and update in January, at the January
And
meeting.
you could be even, well, we just scheduled a meeting and we're just having our, whatever, but.
I think that's reasonable.
I think it's
I think that's reasonable.
okay, perfect.
All right. I guess
Done.
we're done with that for tonight. Look forward to more action in January on this.
Yes, and thank you,
And
Mr.
well,
Light, and thank you, Ms. Drake, for attending and helping us.
You were awesome.
Okay,
Unofficial
back to the
subcommittee
agenda.
member.
Well, we did
I
that.
think so.
Super cute.
Yeah, she's.
It takes a few weeks to get the touch.
So I guess we're to item J2, discussion and possible action regarding policy and procedure relative to the implementation of edge line striping as a traffic calming measure.
Yes, we didn't really intend for this meeting to be all policy, but it's turning out to be all policy tonight. But this is an important one for us in the traffic space. Most of you who've been on the commission for a while understand that we do a lot of traffic calming type conversations, and we have a number of tools that we prevented over time. Edgeline striping is one of those tools, and typically a lot of our traffic calming measures require a visit to the city council because they're changing the way the roadway operates. Edgeline striping falls in the category, we believe as staff, that we may not require that, but we'd like to just run that by you and get your recommendation about whether we take that forward to the city council for a policy decision. In the past, we've always taken this edgeline striping as part of our presentation to the council for an approval before we move forward.
Generally, as I recall, I mean, you come to us usually, right? And then we make a presentation.
Yeah, for traffic calming items, we will bring a kind of a holistic presentation of a neighborhood or a area for your consideration. We'll make recommendations, you'll approve maybe all or some of them, and we'll move forward to the city council to get approval.
Right.
There are certain things that we do now where we don't bring to you or to the city council. For instance, we might put a 25 pavement marker down as in the picture there. We can just do that administratively. It doesn't really change the way the roadway operates. It just enhances the signage that's out there. Edgeline striping, we think, falls in that category and would allow us to be a little more agile and nimble in responding to resident requests for traffic calming tools without having to go through the process of the various public meetings. We could still have them, of course, if that's your desire, but our idea was to shorten the time frame between the request for something and something that we can do and adding to our toolbox. We get a lot of requests, and I'm stealing some of Ryan's thunder here, but we get a lot of requests for speed cushions, for instance, and they're not really the appropriate answer for that particular street, but it's just what people know. So we like to be able to say, well, what's the real problem? Maybe we can address it a different way than speed cushion. This would be a tool that would help us do that. So that's the intro. I hope I haven't taken too much of the body of what Ryan wants to say here.
I had a question on the picture that is shown. What is the overall width of the street from curb to curb?
I don't know the exact, so Ryan Liu, city traffic engineer. I don't know the exact width of Paulina Avenue, but my guess would be probably 40 feet wide, a typical 40-foot wide residential street, which could fit, 2 parking lanes and 1 lane in each direction. Generally, the parked car might take up about 7 to 8 feet and, on both sides, and that leaves you with, 22, 24 feet of space available for the cars. So what you see here as an edge line, it's a solid white line that visually narrows the travel lanes. You don't have to have bicycle lanes or on-street parking to do this. You can do it on streets that have parking or have bicycle lanes. We're not changing the number of travel lanes. We're just narrowing that lane visually so it feels like you have a narrower lane to drive on. And so it's been proven through the ITE that lanes that are 12 feet, 13 feet wide, people tend to have a lot of leeway to go back and forth, go to side to side, and that encourages them to travel faster. Whereas if your lane was 10 or 11 feet wide, then they feel like they can't drive as fast on them. And as a reference point, our typical freeway lanes are 12 feet wide, and then on urban streets and arterials, maybe 10 or 11 feet wide.
Okay. So if we approve the staff recommendation here, the striping could be put in without going through, bringing it to us and then to city council, you would just do it administratively?
That's correct. So the reason for bringing this forward is that we're not changing the character of the streets. We're not reducing the number of lanes. A 1-lane street will still remain a 1-lane street. We're just really memorializing the space, that's available for driving. And then we can, not have to bring every single use case to Public Works and City Council.
And our recommendation here is to take this to city council to kind of bless as a policy and gathering your input and the public's input, such as they are on whether we should do that as a kind of a blanket policy versus a one-off case by case that needs to go to the council.
Yeah, I'm sure there are bureaucracies. What are the timeframes that could be saved? Obviously, approximately.
Well, Ryan has helped shorten our time frame. For those of you who are new, our traffic engineer left a year and a half ago, and I am not a trained traffic engineer, but I was trying to figure out how to be a traffic engineer. So timeframes got longer. Ryan has come in, and Murdad, our part-time traffic engineer, have both come in to help shorten those response times. Typically, depending on how big the area that we need to study, could take months and months at times. Our old policy took sometimes years. So we've tried to reduce that at the request of the council. Give you an example, Ringe Lane here, the commission looked at always stop controls at a couple intersections here, just I think it was last month or maybe August. But one of the complaints for why we want an always stop is to slow traffic down, because they have 2 or 3 blocks to accelerate and not have to slow down. Well, Ryan thought of edgeline striping might be a really good option here to help visually reduce the width and psychologically compel people to slow down a little bit. But we couldn't just go out and do that without bringing it here, and then the next month or when the council has an opening on their agenda for a discussion, bring it to them. So that's we're probably talking, we could respond to a resident or a neighborhood in a matter of weeks versus a matter of a few months if we had clear sailing with council meeting agendas and all that kind of
Well, now, with some of the measures, I mean, it's just the striping that you want to do administratively. I mean, if you're going to go for an all-way, 4-way stop, that would still.
We're only talking about the edgeline striping tool, that
Okay.
one particular.
But these other things would presumably still go to the commission and then on to city council.
Yeah, it would just be this type of traffic calming device. And I think Ringe Lane is a good example of this, where the typical process is a resident will come to us with concerns about a single location and looking for traffic calming measures, typically stop signs at a single intersection, whereas we as staff, we're kind of looking at a bigger picture holistically on a corridor basis, which residents may not necessarily look at a whole corridor for traffic calming, but with an edge line, thinking of Ringe as an example, it's a 28-foot wide street, same width as all the other typical residential streets in that area. The only difference here is it doesn't have the parking. So now you have 2 14-foot lanes that are wide. And this is an opportunity case to narrow those lanes back to 10 feet wide, something like that. And look at the whole corridor and not just responding to one resident's request for a stop sign.
I think studies have shown the efficacy of this, and there are a lot of great benefits. I mean, a big one I think for me is like reducing future tort liability. Like this is, edge striping has shown that obviously it can reduce that from a liability standpoint. If this was approved, like what would be the steps and measures that the city and the staff would determine a go, no-go decision on implementation? Like, does it need like resident notification? Right. What are those processes in terms of implementation from a city standpoint?
Yeah, it's a great question. We typically will get a request from a resident. Murdad is kind of our first contact guy. He goes out, he'll meet with the residents. And like I said before, a lot of times they'll just ask for what they know, speed cushions or something. That's not always the most appropriate. This most recent one, Avenue H, we're showing up there, is in District 1. District 1 council member has been through enough speed cushion conversations to know that they're not that popular. He's not a big fan. So we're trying to come up with alternatives. So, and Murdad talked to this group of, I think it was 5 or 6, she gathered her neighbors together. He came and met with them in their backyard and just talked about options. And this was one that they really liked. And we thought, well, that's great. It would be nice to be able to just go out and implement that. We could do a notification process. We do a lot of surveys. Just let us know if you have objections or get a yes, no response or something. We can build all that in to our staff work. We do certainly want to have the support of the residents on the block, any block. But Ringe Lane, for instance, we don't have a lot of homes that front Ringe Lane. They front the cross streets. And so there are blocks like that where we may not be quite as rigorous about getting every resident's thumbs up on that. Just a lot of times it's not understood, and it really can help. So we that's kind of the judgment call that that we learn as we go and do it right and do it wrong occasionally. We learn those lessons, and we try and work with the residents just kind of one-on-one, and try and get the understanding of the people that live in the affected areas.
And with a treatment like this, edgeline striping, it's easily implementable and easily removable as well. It's just paint on the street.
And for instance, if we approached residents on Avenue H, for example, this isn't the case that I know of, but if we had some people very much in favor and other people very much opposed, then we would certainly bring it here. We would want this body to make a decision rather than it be just a staff level decision when there's, contention. Yeah.
Thank you.
With Ringe Lane here, would adding stripes, would that provide any parking whatsoever?
No, we would not be adding parking.
There's currently no parking allowed.
No parking
Yeah,
allowed.
I just thought if it was like on, one side or something, if it would scoot the middle lane over or something, or?
Yeah,
I didn't know, so unlike the other photographs you have that clearly show what it could achieve, and I thought, wow, what a great idea, but what would it do for Ringe Lane, just to have the 2 additional lines on the side in order to narrow up the 2 middle lanes?
That would be correct, yeah. So it'd be 2 lines on the side.
Would they be bike lanes then?
Convert it to
or
bike lane or something?
No, they technically would not be bike lanes because, Ringe being only 28 feet wide, if we have 2 10-foot lanes in the center, that only leaves 4 feet and 4 feet on each side, which is a little too little for a bike lane at that point.
How about a high-speed e-bike lane? I'm just kidding.
Well, Ringe Lane is, Ringe Lane is already designated as a Class 3 bike facility, which means sharing the road. People, despite they don't know that they're not official bike lanes, and so people will often use the space in the edgeline striping as kind of a bike lane.
Absolutely.
And helps them feel some sense of comfort that vehicles shouldn't be over here.
And I think one of the points of a Class 3 bike route is that these are streets that are friendly to walk and bike on. And so the slower that the cars go, the more friendly it can feel for someone who's biking. And so that can be part of a Class 3 implementation as well, is slowing down the
So
vehicles.
is there more to the presentation, or we've been interrupting with questions, or should we?
We've
Want to give your
basically,
speech? Yeah.
we've basically done the whole presentation, and I think, that your questions is what I would have talked about anyways.
Okay, so the question now is, do we have a motion to, or what do we think of staff's recommendation?
May I ask one question?
Yes.
So I just have a question. So what would happen, let's say, if a biker used the edge lanes or used the lanes inside the edging? Is it, I mean, I know that they can share the road. Is there any problem with them using that as a bike lane, potentially?
Not to my knowledge, I don't think there's a problem to using it. The only thing I can think of is there are certain cases where if there is a designated bike lane that's been signed and striped as such, and if the biker is not in it, then that could, trigger other regulations.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, if we put an edge line on Ringe as an example, as Brian mentioned, it's not the minimum 5 feet that would be necessary to make it an official bike lane. We'd probably do some cross hatching. It just becomes a non-driving lane for any vehicle. And a bicycle, under the vehicle code, being a vehicle, is not supposed to use that space. They're supposed to be using the travel lane.
Okay.
If they choose to do it, as Andy mentioned, because they feel a little bit safer to be away from the vehicles, no different than they would without any striping whatsoever. The goal out of this is to truly define a much more narrowed travel path for the automobiles, so they know you don't have 14 feet of wide lane to drive through. Your 10-foot travel lane is the path that you're supposed to use.
So if a bike
So
was in the lane, you
staff's
wouldn't get cited?
request and recommendation is that we approve this, that you can implement these administratively without going to city council and us.
That's
Any
it.
comments or questions about that, or?
I like the idea.
I was gonna say,
Of giving
I
staff-
think it's genius. I don't know who came up with this, but wow,
Ryan.
really, really good.
I didn't invent the idea, but I'm bringing
Well,
it
it was
forward
in
to you tonight.
response to a request on Ringe Lane, is that right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because this is usually one of the options we're afforded as a commission, one of the tools in the shed. And yet it's the one we probably use the least because it's not been really, we haven't been able to convince anyone through any kind of real empirical data. I think we do all, as drivers, agree that it slows us down. So I'm inclined to just, yes, to actually make that.
It's less controversial than the other things, that's for sure. It's less
One question I had though of staff is, this allows you to expedite it right away or within a reasonable amount of time. As soon as you can, you make the approval, you send staff out to do it. Is that usually without any kind of speed counts or anything? What I'm getting at, is there a way for us as a city to implement the white stripe and then either take a speed counts before and speed counts maybe a month or two after to gather that empirical data to see if this is really a more useful tool because it's the least expensive, I think. It's paint.
Commissioner Furubashi, maybe I'll give this a shot for you.
Okay.
It doesn't change anything from our current procedures other than it skips the mandate of having to come to you as a commission and having to go to the city council afterwards. As Andy mentioned, we're still going to go through a consensus process from the residents. If we can't get that consensus, we're not going to promote or push something onto the residents that they're not willing or would like to have on their particular street. So in essence, we're saving the time. If we've got the consensus, if we've got the data collection, the follow-up data assessment as well, all those will remain in place. Those don't change.
Okay.
It's having the need to come to you as a commission and having to go to the city
Take that
council
first.
subsequently.
I remember
That's the real efficiency improvement out of it.
I remember when you did a traffic calming thing on Ford Avenue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, it came to us and was back and forth, and then it went to city, and before it finally got done, I think it was like a year. And I think this would greatly enhance the department's abilities to respond to requests, and it's all good, so.
I have a real quick question. I like it. Real quick question is, just for curiosity's sake, from a legal perspective, right turn, are you supposed to use it as a transition to the right turn, or you're not supposed to enter it in a right turn? I'm just curious.
So generally at the intersections, we'll probably taper it back to where the asphalt meets the gutter. And you can start using that space to make your right turn.
Okay, I see.
It tapers at the corners, right, that's, yeah.
Question. I'm sorry for the confusion. I would love to know the commission's thoughts on this as well as the city's. Since it's new, what would be, I'm sorry, had to reiterate this. I'm just thinking about the bikers. Like if the bikes are in the lane and they're technically supposed to be there, would they get a citation? What is the policy towards that? Like they start using it as a bike lane?
I'm going to give you my hypothetical, and that is
Please.
if it is a non-travel lane for any vehicles, they may be citable, but that's up to the officer to determine at the time.
Are other aspects of traffic calming would still come to us, or other things that's like speed cushions and?
We have a policy for speed cushions, so they would come to you.
Okay.
That's one of our traffic calming, and we have CIP-related work like bulb outs, concrete bulb outs at the intersections, things like that, traffic calming tools that we can't really decide administratively because of the capital outlay required. This fits within our operational budget for traffic calming pretty easily. And just back to your point on kind of before and after speed reduction, we don't do that everywhere on traffic calming. We used to do that. We used to have a very rigid process, which accounted for a lot of the time. We'd offer you these few things that don't require those kind of studies. If that didn't work, then we'd go on to the next thing, and it was always 6 months of trial, but we'd wait 3 months after they were installed to let it normalize. So it's just a very long process. So we're not necessarily trying to tie it to before and after, although academically we might do that just to repeat the results that we see in the national studies that are done here.
Okay, so anybody have a
I'd
motion?
like to make a motion that we recommend, I'm just going to take it right from our administrative report, that we recommend staff advance to the city council a policy change to allow administrative consideration and installation of edge line striping by staff as a general, where feasible, traffic calming measure.
Is there a second?
I'd like to second that.
Sorry, didn't mean to talk over you. I guess we should do a roll. Is there any public comment?
There's no, no public, no e-comments and no one on Zoom, so.
All right.
And for the
Let's do
record,
a
we had
roll
Mr.
call vote.
Beely, Commissioner Beely was the second. Okay. So Commissioner Arata,
Aye.
Commissioner Funabashi,
Aye.
Commissioner Beely,
Aye.
Commissioner Sal,
Aye.
Chair Simpson.
Aye.
Great.
Barely passes. Okay, what are we up to now? J2, I don't know what this one is. Is this? No, J3.
3.
Discussion and possible action regarding policy implementation of leading pedestrian intervals, LPI, as a traffic safety measure.
Try and say less so Ryan has more to say on this one. But we did want to do just a slight difference. This isn't traffic calming necessarily, but traffic safety. And so this follows a different process where we wouldn't be so much discretionary of the commission on these type of issues. But we haven't used LPI as a policy in the city's signal timing plans. And so the big question is, do we want to or do we not want to include these in our signal timing
So
plans?
where is this? This is they do it at the intersection of Pier Avenue and PCH, don't they?
Yeah,
In
so
Hermosa?
if you look through my presentation.
Go ahead.
Doing it, yeah.
So yeah, why don't I start with what this is? So typically, if you're waiting to cross the street as a pedestrian, the green light for the cars will go on at the same time as the walking man for you. So generally, you'll start going at the same time. What this is a signal timing change in the cabinet. So it's just a software change where we will let the pedestrian phase go on between 3 to 7 seconds before the cars. That gives people who are walking a head start to start crossing the street, makes them visible in the intersection before the cars get their green light and start to make their turns. And as you mentioned, with PCH intersections, so this is something that Caltrans has adopted as their policy. They provided a lot of guidance that are available for local agencies to use, and the item before you tonight is to use those guidelines as our guidelines as well. And so with leading pedestrian intervals, they are the most effective at crosswalks that are longer, where the limit lines are set back more, when we have a higher volume of pedestrians who are older or student aged, when it's really hard to see the crosswalk, limited visibility areas, and locations where we have a lot of collisions between vehicles and pedestrians where there's a failure to yield in the crosswalk. So for example, in the figure to the right, 2 major streets, those are situations where we'd want to implement LPIs, the head start for pedestrians on all 4 crossings of that street. And so we've had discussions internally, and we found that for city-owned traffic signals, this is a pretty easy fix or change to implement at all of our city-owned signals at little to no cost.
We're also recommending that we approach this on a corridor by corridor basis rather than an intersection by intersection basis. Just because changing the timing, it signals, especially our corridors that are coordinated, synchronized, impacts down the line. There's knock-on effects.
Yeah.
The county does have a number of our corridors in their TSSP, Traffic Signal Synchronization Program. And so they do the timing for us, and these are the kind of tweaks that the county would probably do at no cost. That's been our experience. So it's really small cost, and we would start looking into corridors where this might be most appropriately applied. Initially, these heavier, busier corridors.
Does that cover all of PCH because of Caltrans?
Well, PCH is not really, Caltrans is its own animal, so we don't, the county handles our major corridors, Artesia, Torrance, Aviation.
What about
and,
Grant?
No, not
That's a
Grant.
city corridor.
That's
ours.
That's
That's
ours, right?
ours.
So that would be one of the ones you'd be considering?
We could look at that one certainly, and Manhattan Beach Boulevard is the other that's coming online with the county.
Another question. Now, this what you're talking about here is a 3 to 7 second head start. Now, the county does it on some, I think it's much longer than that. And I'm thinking of the intersection of Pier Avenue and PCH in Hermosa Beach. And that is now set up so that the pedestrians get to cross, and all the cars are stopped.
Must be a scramble.
Yeah.
right?
That one might be, are the pedestrians crossing diagonally too?
No, that's down, at the foot of Pier, it's down by Pier Plaza, but no, this is, they don't cross diagonally, they cross straight across. But they get they get 20 seconds to go across before the light turns for the traffic to make right turns.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that particular location, but at least for Caltrans guidance and most other cities that have guidance, so LADOT, City of San Francisco, some of those larger agencies, they'll say 3 to 7 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Chairperson, I think that what we're seeing is that not only is Caltrans required to do this, that they've implemented it on our local intersections along Pacific Coast Highway. We have observed that on many of our crossings here within the city of Redondo Beach. So it's not just what we've observed, but as Ryan said, this is something that we believe is a safety enhancement and improvement for our pedestrians. It will have some impact on coordination and synchronization, but we'd like to see that consideration to move forward.
Okay. I know, Ryan, you mentioned minimal costs. So, and I know the county is subsidizing a portion of the corridors or intersections. Has the city done an assessment on like equipment, signal controllers in terms of compatibility for any new install or retrofit costs, things of that nature?
So we've talked with our electrician, and he said that the current city signals can handle this.
Okay.
We just have to go to, so basically we could send the work order out. We would go to the cabinet, and it'll take probably a few minutes to change the software, and then we'll just have to reprint a new timing sheet for that.
Okay, that's it. Okay.
And just bigger picture, the city does have several programs for upgrading traffic signal controllers throughout the city, kind of on a project by project, corridor by corridor basis. Part of it funded by Metro, and not, we usually try and use transportation restricted funding for that.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions, thoughts, comments? Looks good. Looks good to me. Anybody want to care to make a motion?
Motion to accept? I'm sorry, you have to read it out.
Yep.
You get used to this.
So I guess it's to accept staff's recommendation that
To recommend the implementation of, and then read off. the-
Alternative number 1. Thanks for,
There you go. Yeah, it's on the slide.
just kind of fell in.
that on the slide. And end with the.
And this one right here.
Recommend staff advance to the city council policy change to consider implementation of leading pedestrian intervals when feasible and appropriate. Is that your motion?
Yes, can you see that button right there on the top?
Read out this later.
Just read it, yeah.
No, it's just this one. Was it? Was it J2?
J3.
J3. So I recommend the discussion of possible action regarding city policy implementation of leading pedestrian intervals, LPI, as a traffic safety measure.
Do we have a
Second
second?
that motion?
You second? Okay.
All in favor? I'm sorry, that was
Any
you.
comment? Any comment?
There's
Get your job already.
no e-comments, and there are no one on Zoom or in the audience that would like to talk.
Nobody's interested in us anymore.
So I have the motion by Commissioner Beal and then Abili, and the second by Commissioner Sao, right?
I believe that was correct.
All right. We're ready for a roll call vote. Commissioner Arata?
Sure, aye.
Commissioner Funbashi?
Aye.
Commissioner Bealy?
Aye.
Commissioner Sao?
Aye.
And Chair Simpson.
Aye. Okay, what's next on the agenda here? I think it may be
Yeah, thank you. Nice job.
discussion about, actually whether we're going to have a meeting in, why is this not,
On Christmas.
on Christmas, which I don't
Right,
think we
right.
will.
I knew that date sounded familiar.
Busy.
And so do we need a presentation on this or we
No,
just?
just to give a little clarity, in days past, the staff would have just canceled this
Right.
meeting. There's been some challenges at city council meetings about cancellation of meetings and who has authority to do so and all that. So we wanted to
Have
just,
to do it.
well, we wanted to bring it to your attention that there is that if you have a meeting, none of the staff will be here because we're not working that day. So
And City Hall is closed.
City Hall is closed. You
That'd be
may not be
kinda
able to
tough.
get in, but so we recommend either a cancellation or a reschedule. There is one date available currently on the city clerk's calendar for this room, which is December 7th, which is just a week or so, 10 days maybe after. It's a Thursday. It's just not long after our end of November meeting.
We meet the 27th.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to
So-
me that it would be very unlikely that there would be business, that if we had a meeting in November, that then the the 7th, we probably wouldn't have anything ready to bring forward to us.
You certainly don't have to decide tonight. You'd have another meeting between now and then to make a decision. But if you would like to consider a reschedule, then I would want to go back to the city clerk and confirm the availability of that date, because there are maybe other groups who are falling into the category of needing to reschedule in December.
Well,
And it's first come, first serve on that date, so.
From,
May I ask, is there any I mean, we always discuss the level of business, and it always seems with our Commission in Public Works, there's always something that we can discuss and fix around town. And sometimes that's the grief that we might get because it's kind of perceived like there's always something that we can do in Public Works. But we need staff, obviously, to have put together an agenda and these presentations and stuff. So I always defer to them and just ask, is there anything so pressing that you feel you need to present in that couldn't come out in next month's meeting, for example, that it would be okay if we just took December off?
I'm not aware of anything that would
And
require
if
us to
something
meet in
came up
December.
by the next meeting, we could bring that up. Or, I mean, we can vote it tonight, or we can put the vote off until next month.
I would welcome a motion that we cancel the December meeting and
Yeah, and then if something pressing comes up by next meeting, they can bring that up, and we can always vote to change that if we really need to.
I can't imagine we will.
So,
So is there a motion to cancel the December 25th meeting?
Well, so you do need to, I know officially we need to take public comment.
Sure.
And e-comments. There's.
We don't have a motion yet.
Okay, sure.
So is there a motion to do that? And to cancel the,
I'll make a motion that we cancel the December 25th meeting
okay, is there a
for
second?
fear of bah humbug.
Is there a second?
No,
to
forget that last part.
I second the motion.
Okay. Is there any public comments? Seeing no public comment, I will ask if there's
There's no
e-comment or
e-comments, there's.
nobody on Zoom.
No one on Zoom.
We
and
used
no
to
one
have
in the
people
audience.
watching us all the time.
We'll get there again.
There've been nights when there were 100 people in here.
It's World Series Game 7 day today, maybe that's why.
I guess we need a roll call on this
Football
one
game,
too?
Sure.
Change it if we need to.
Did you, is there any other, no other comments? Right?
No, I think we're all,
And so we had, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Commissioner Funabashi that was the motion, and then the second was Commissioner Beely,
correct.
just for the record. Commissioner Arata?
Aye.
Commissioner Funabashi?
Aye.
Commissioner Beely?
Aye.
Commissioner South?
Aye.
Chair Simpson?
Aye. Okay, I guess we are now to item K, which is an opportunity to make referrals to the staff. Does anyone have a referral to the staff?
Anything there on this end?
Commissioner Arata, you want to ponder a moment?
I had one issue that I wanted to bring up as of late, and that is the section of southbound Pacific Coast Highway between Anita Redondo and the very first street where Catalina. It was just this last weekend that I was in town, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's just backing up into the intersection. So I wondered if something got out of synchronization or something. I wanted to wait until I observed it coming tonight on a Monday night. And it wasn't as bad as the weekend, but there were about 3 cars sticking out. And it's just because they didn't stop on the Hermosa side. They went right through. waiting for that light right by Malibu the seafood to turn green. I think what might be factoring it is the light pulling out of the Redondo shopping center that's right there as well. Because I know that kind of triggers it. But anyway, just to make you aware, it's been a little trouble spot the last 4 or 5 days. So I just want to make you aware of that.
Other comments?
Oh, that's.
Yeah, I have one. I live in District 5, right above Phelan. My address is really on Johnston, but I was out walking with my wonderful wife, and we were kind of coming back out for our walk. From our walk, it was full dark, and 1 or 2 cars are just blowing through stop signs, like not even slowing down. Is there anything that we can do in order to put some kind of, since we're not paying attention to the stop signs, you know, Redondo Beach PD it's not that much of a, popular area. So obviously there's not the need for them to be there looking at stop signs all night is really kind of a pointless. But is there any kind of speed reduction things that we could use for that? Anything that
What's the intersection you're?
It's like Johnston over by Johnston and Phelan.
Yeah, your stop signs are, again, not a speed reduction. They're supposed to stop. They're not
I
necessarily
understand
supposed
that.
to slow
But when
down.
people just blow
You need to
through.
get the cops
The
there to
assistance
enforce
that
it,
we
though.
look for is specific locations. We'll let our traffic enforcement team know, and they'll go in and do some selective enforcement. We know they're not going to be there 24/7.
Right.
But keeping the drivers guessing is one of the ways that they're effective in doing so. And yeah, we have heard some of the concerns, and we can be relaying that information to the police department.
We also had a request, it's been several months, maybe almost a year now, from residents on Johnston about speed cushion installation. The process involves them collecting petition signatures from 2/3 of the residents on the street before we start our engineering study of that. So we have not heard back from them. They may have gotten discouraged. They may have set it aside for other things, but that is a tool that's available for speed reduction, is the speed cushion program.
Those comments? I have one.
Unfortunate, they just blast right through them.
Yeah, the project on Grant Avenue with the bulb outs and the new traffic signals, that never came before us. I don't quite understand, but I guess city council just did it without us being involved. But my referral item is this: they're just finishing up now. And at the intersection of Grant and Flagler, on would be the northeast corner, the fire hydrant used to be there. And it was moved slightly down a little bit, so there was a tremendous amount of red curb put in there. In this bulb out project, the fire hydrant has been moved up onto Flagler, where there are no parking anyway. But the red curb has remained down on Grant. And the problem with that is it's taking away 2 or 3 parking places probably, which are very valuable there. And it would seem to me to be sensible to remove the red curb because there's no reason for it whatsoever that I can see. Now, maybe there's some thought that maybe the people who are doing the traffic construction are going to paint stripes and maybe they'll take it out, but I don't know how you remove red curb. I think there's a procedure to put it in that, as I recall, has become before us at various times, but.
We designed that project to move the fire hydrant and remove the red curb for just that reason, and they just haven't gotten to it yet.
But it will happen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Supposed to complete the project in December, so a few
Pretty
things
close
to
to
do.
done now. I mean, all the lights are in, there's a little bit of and they look like they're now that's the other question. What are the little like cameras up on the, it looks like? Are those sensors that sense when traffic's coming?
Ryan,
So those cameras up there are the new detection system. So the city's moving towards using cameras as detection. They'll detect the vehicles as opposed to, in the past, we have those little circles, the little loops in the road. So the cameras are just the latest in the technology.
To sense the vehicle's coming.
Yeah, to detect that a vehicle's coming in, and then your signal will get called.
Okay, makes sense. Learn something every night. Any other,
Is that an actual camera, or is that just like a little radar thing?
It's a camera.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And
not
I
going to
do
be
not,
used for other purposes to track?
I was gonna follow up with that. I do not believe we have the storage capacity to store all that data.
We don't.
We do not.
Okay, all right. Any other referrals to staff?
I have a question.
Yes.
Who is responsible for going and like maintaining, like, let's say, in front of a stop sign, if there's some hedges that are kind of overgrown, where it impedes the view of a stop sign?
Just email that to us and we'll go ahead and address it. Sometimes it's overgrowth that's coming from private property, but if it's in the public right of way, we usually have access to that and we'll trim that back.
Or let me just throw out a pitch for our mobile app, Access Redondo.
Right on the front
Very,
start
very
page.
successful.
Perfect place.
Every time one puts something in
And
there.
we pride
Quick
ourselves on
response.
quick response times to those. So,
Indeed, you're here.
so use that.
Absolutely.
So no other referrals to staff? That means we're gonna, looks like adjourn this meeting probably at 9 o'clock, which is a record time for us. Someone care to make the motion to adjourn until, to the November meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There you go.
All right.
Chair at a meeting when nobody would vote to adjourn.